All right, so welcome tonight. Like I said before, but repeating since I started recording now, we're looking at Bootstrap some tonight. Bootstrap, you'll hear all over the place, and you'll start noticing it once you realize or kind of see what some of the default settings are. But just like Bootstrap's website says, it, according to them, is the most popular HTML, CSS, and JS framework for developing responsive mobile-first projects on the web, which is probably true. Looking at some of their statistics and knowing how many people use it. But yeah, we're going to look at their version 3 documentation. It's what is currently in release. Bootstrap 4 is in beta. It took a long time for them to get there. If you just go to the regular straight getbootstrap.com website, that's where it takes you right now. I just haven't played around with it enough. I know it's really similar in how it works, but some things did change. So you'd probably want to, if you're starting a new project, use Bootstrap 4 at this point in time. There's going to be a lot of similarities, when they don't want to break everything. But there are going to be some differences. So, but getting acquainted with it and how it works and kind of the general feel and system for it, I think you'll be able to parse the Bootstrap 4 documentation just fine. But we are going to look at this. I'm going to use 3 in the examples. So let's get a web page started up. Should be able to see this now. Here. Yeah, this document in the title now. If you thought that was crazy magic, how all that just filled in, something called Emmet. I think almost every code editor comes with it. If not, look up the add-on, the plugin, the extension. And yeah, that was just an exclamation point and a tab. And it did all that for us. So that's nice. Wanted to give you that quick tip because I know sometimes finding this stuff and getting it set up can be a kind of a pain. So start talking about Bootstrap. We want to know how do we use it. So I'm not just going to send you over to their page, even though I think their getting started page is pretty solid. And it walks you through how to use it with a CDN or install it with Bower or MVM or Composer or Less and Fast and everything else, etc. But really, diving into it a little bit more step by step is going to be, I think, more beneficial. So first time I saw Bootstrap, it was just something that I heard about, heard around, and it was something that I could make my website responsive easier. So Bootstrap is a mobile up framework. So it is designed thinking of the mobile view first and the desktop view second. That's not to say that most of us will probably be using it in a desktop down sort of fashion where we're going to build our site and look at a full-size web page and then look at it later, how it gets collapsed down. But it is designed to be responsive by, from the ground up. It's how it was designed to begin with. All right. So Bootstrap. Bootstrap can be boiled down, everything that we know about it, into mainly 3 files. There's a CSS file, a JavaScript file, and then there's some glyph icons that they include. So let's go and I'm just going to use CDN.js, which is a place that hosts things for us. Here's all the Bootstrap files. I'm just going to drop down to the, maybe 4 is official now. Either way, we're going to go with 3, like we said before. It's called Twitter Bootstrap because I do believe Twitter developed it originally. Honestly, always seen it called Twitter Bootstrap. I just made that assumption, never actually found if that fact is true, but kind of assume that it is, because Twitter probably wouldn't let their name be used like that, unless it was. So yeah, we see there's a CSS file, There's a JavaScript file down here, and there's these glyph icons. So I won't dive too deep into what each different file are and why there's so many of them, but they're just different. This one's going to be easy to read. There's a map and a minified map, and but really all you need is going to be 3 of these files. So also Bootstrap uses jQuery. So you have to have jQuery in your project as well. Bootstrap isn't going to be able to do its things the way that it wants to using jQuery or without jQuery. Granted, some of the things you won't need the bootstrap.js file for. The documentation is pretty good about explicitly saying, you know, this is a JavaScript thing. Make sure that you have the JavaScript part of the package, or else it's not going to work. And then, yeah, everything else that you might read about when looking up stuff for Bootstrap, grunt, gulp, sass, less, bower, etc., is not required. There are things that people use and other tools, but the only things that are truly required are these 3 files and jQuery. So you don't have to use a framework like Bootstrap. And sometimes it's not beneficial to start with a framework. As you see in the curriculum, you know, we don't start with Rails. We start with Ruby, and then we build on Ruby even more, and then we look at some SQL, and we look at Rack, and we look at Sinatra, and then we finally get to Rails so that we can see all the pieces as they're working together. So definitely want to recommend that you dive in deep into really understanding what responsive design is. I'm not going to be providing that here, but what, you know, kind of what, you know, media queries are and things like that, and how those work and what Bootstrap's really doing under the hood. But some ways that, you know, a framework can help you is it'll prevent repetition between projects. So like if you're typing out a whole bunch of styles that you're like, I like the way this looks, I want to use this all the time, you're gonna have to be repeating that. Implementing the responsive design to start is definitely something that can be daunting. So having it implemented is something that's nice. It's going to add a consistency to the design because, you know, you're going to make sure and you know that it's not going to be different. You're not going to be building things. You might miss something and it's not looking good across your project. Or even using one across developers when you're in a team, using a framework helps with that as well. Everybody knows what things are. There's a single source of truth, so to speak. It also allows us to quickly build things. So that's going to be one of the main benefits for us in this program and using something like Bootstrap is we're not going to have to write all the CSS and all the styles by hand. We're going to get a whole bunch of stuff given to us. We're going to use it. We're going to make it work, and it's going to make our lives a lot easier, get things done a lot quicker. Also, frameworks can help ensure cross-browser compatibility. So they'll make sure that, you know, they're taking into account what works where. They'll have, you know, all the bases covered. And, you know, we benefit from the fact that Bootstrap has a whole lot of people using it, a whole lot of people looking at it. If something breaks, someone's like, oh, this doesn't work here, we need to fix it. You're not going to worry as much about the edge cases because so many people are using it, those edge cases are being seen and being dealt with and handled. And then the biggest thing that I think is probably, excuse me, or not probably, but is one of the biggest features that Bootstrap comes with is the grid. So this is probably the biggest part and one of the most confusing parts of Bootstrap. We'll dive into a little bit with an example, but this is the entire layout is based on a grid in Bootstrap. Bootstrap basically implemented what CSS, 's, 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 's It's actually interesting. Learned about how CSS actually gets finalized and formalized. And the grid has been in the pipeline for like 15 years or something crazy like that. It's just the organization body and how they have to go through that process takes a really long time. And then once they get things formalized and to spec, browsers have to implement them too. But yes, the core CSS also adds styling to everything. So between those two things, those are, I think, the biggest things. We have something to create our layouts and something to style everything. And then yeah, so it's going to style our forms, tables, buttons, lists, images. It's going to help us create navigation bars. That's the CSS. And then we have some JavaScript in there, which is going to help us create modals, which not many of us are probably doing to start. Carousels, alerts, pop-ups, drop-downs, accordions, some cool things. But, that's why I said I don't think I've always needed the JavaScript part of it for simple projects. Bootstrap has some examples to start from, but I think that, just going for it, starter template, Bootstrap frame, grid, Jumbotron, some of these things. I think just going for it can be helpful. I found that trying to utilize these are just too much sometimes because, this is trying to show you everything that's available. So it's like, hey, look, this is everything. And trying to parse that and figure out what you need to use and, looking at the source of this and, what exactly is needed here. Like the nav bar gets really confusing really quickly. It seems like a lot. And it can be. But really, if we just build it piece by piece, I think we come out better. So like I said, we use CDN.js for this so that I don't have to worry about downloading it in local files. First thing we need to do is include it in our project. So let's change title. Then in our header, we need a link to our CSS. I'll grab that in 1 second. All right. And then also get inside the end of our body. Next, we're going to need jQuery here. Bootstrap there. Oh wait, no, just the CSS, not the theme. JS. Yeah. jQuery. All right. And then let's start. You're a classic hello world. There we go. viewport. Yeah. So this is the basic start, and this is all that we really need to get started. So we have our doc type, we have our HTML head and body tags. The meta name viewport tag is particularly important for responsive design because it ensures that our website has a one-to-one ratio with the viewport, which is the screen size. That's to maintain ratio and aspect things as things change. We add Bootstrap CSS, and then we put the jQuery and Bootstrap core JavaScript before our closing body tag. One thing that you should know, and I believe it's in the notes on Bootstrap site, but jQuery has to go before the Bootstrap JavaScript, or else it won't work. Because the page needs to load jQuery first, and then Bootstrap after it.
Where do you have the jQuery at right there? Oh, okay, I see it. So is there a reason why you have to put the one up at the top section before in the head and then the other two down at the bottom of the body?
So you don't have to do that. However, well, yeah, you don't have to. However, the thought process in that is this page is going to load from top to bottom. And okay, you want your CSS to load before your page loads because you want those styles to be in place. Whereas JavaScript things typically are more about functionality instead of how things are viewed. So you can let those load after the content loads. Okay. Otherwise, you'll get depending on how large your page is, you'll see this and all of your page without styles, and then all of a sudden, when the CSS loads, everything will just change.
Oh, that's cool.
So you want the CSS to load first. Otherwise, it can just make things look really wonky. And depending on the size of the site, you can put JavaScript above the rest of the code. It really just depends on how things are loading. So typically, a best practice is to start with your JavaScript at the end. You also don't always know, I mean, like, I have a fabulous connection speed here, but that doesn't mean everybody who views my site will. So just accounting for that as well. So, but yeah, that's typically why CSS is at the top and scripts are at the bottom of HTML pages. All right. So let's look at an nav bar example. And let's just look at the source. So let's see. We have nothing on our page right now, but we can get, you know, something going pretty quickly just by copying and pasting. So let's grab some of this stuff. Is this the one I want to see? Let's actually get off the examples page and go to yes. No, it's on. Yeah, it's on. That's one. So you see, here's examples of things. Nav inverse, make it black, and such. So let's grab this first example. Throw it right here. Now if we go back to our demo, nav bar.
So how would you go in and change the stuff on that? You would just read through it?
Yeah, so it can feel, I think the base one can be a little bit too much because there's two parts to this nav bar. There's a part that we don't see and there's a part that we do see. So this nav bar is designed, and you see this brand and toggle get group for better mobile display. There's a section that's going to toggle. This is a toggle for when it's what's called the hamburger. So what is it? When you go mobile, there's this menu. So I'm actually going to do a simpler one. Have some code. Use. And I'll throw this in the notes for the video when it gets uploaded to the video site. A link to a gist or something with this code so that you have a base that's a little bit easier to start with. Yeah, let's say it's a little bit simpler. Web development. There we go. So now we have the start of our nav bar. Excuse me. And it seems like a lot, but it's really not. The thing is, Bootstrap uses classes for everything. And the biggest thing is understanding how they interact and how you can combine them. So the first line is line 11. We're defining the entire bar as a nav bar. And then we're using nav bar inverse to make it dark. And we're using this nav bar static top to put it on the top as opposed to a fixed header. Then we have this class container. Containers will set a max width, so within the full width. And then we have a nav bar header. Now this contains the quote unquote brand information where we put a logo or a company name, and we have this fictional company. And then we see a button. So staying with our nesting, we have our button. And this is hidden on the desktop and becomes a drop-down little what's called hamburger because it's 3 lines. So it's like bun on top, meat in the middle, bun on the bottom. I learned that one and people are always like, oh, that's why they call it a hamburger. It does. I don't know if it really looks like a hamburger. It looks like 3 lines to me. But so yeah, each of these, and that's what all of this is, making that hamburger. And this is saying toggle it, and then each of these is the 3 little bars on that hamburger button. So the rest of everything else, once you get outside of this little div where our brand is, so here's our brand, we're not collapsed, column web development, and we have the pieces. So we have our nav bar, we're aligning it to the right. It's our nav bar actual navigation. We're putting it to the right. Get back to it. So we see it's on the right over here. And then the way the nav bar works is it's a list of items. So each item is going to be something in the nav bar. So we have a list item about, which is here. Then we set a class of dropdown. And here we're just following the documentation at this point. You can see the nav bar has all these different things that we can do. and kind of just finding the pieces and putting them together is what's going on. This saying that we have a toggle on it, and toggle being the little caret there on the side. Here's our menu, and that's telling the drop down menu. So you see how they're nested? That connects them together, and we put our list inside of it. Or, no, here's our caret, sorry, in the span. The toggle tells us to toggle when we click it. And it's all CSS class. So I know it's a lot, but it's really just pulling little pieces and connecting them together. Let's see. Let's add another piece to our puzzle. Let's make one of those big attention grabbing, what I don't know if they came up with it, but what Bootstrap calls a Jumbotron. Here's a Jumbotron. I can actually just grab this one. Maybe we'll change it a little bit. All right. That's not doing what I thought it was. Okay. So let's actually, yeah, I think that's good. We can keep the button hello world. Wonder if, oh, I thought that would actually put stuff there. Either way. Let's put some words in here. Get some big text. So one paragraph. Cool. So we have some words in there. Nested right. All right. Hey, class. So buttons are set up using these button classes, and they're just stacked on top of each other. They're pretty nifty. You can do a lot of things with them. Buttons. There's these main colors. There's red, orange, light blue, green, dark blue, white, and then without. There's sizes. They're all just adding on classes. So you make a button type, or you make a link with the class of this button type, and yeah, you throw on, if you want block level buttons, so they span the full width of a parent. You can set them to an active state. You can gray them out, so they're disabled. But it's all just seeing the CSS classes and putting them together. Let's see, what do we think of this? I think we're missing something. We need a container in here. And that will help us not sit all the way on the edge of the page like we are right now. The container is one of the things that you're going to want to use, kind of nest everything inside of containers. They're going to make sure that the code stays spaced well from the sides. They're going to what should I call it? To set the max width to the content. Let's get rid of our other hello world. Now let's set some stuff up with the grid. So some parts of the grid can be very challenging. The grid in Bootstrap is a 12-column grid. So it can be tricky to work with at times because if it's like, you can't divide 12 by 5. So there's no way to equally split it up into fifths. I mean, I'm sure somebody has figured out how, but I don't know how, just because the math doesn't work.
So there's columns and not rows?
Correct. So as you add things, you have rows. But you're working with 12 columns. That's your grid. So you create your own rows with row. We've created our first row. Now in here, these will contain the columns. And the key is to always having them add up to 12 when we're looking at columns. And our container, the base.
Can you create those rows with a section tab, with a section tag instead? Or does it have to be a div?
I believe you can. Bootstrap's just looking at the classes. So like we could, this is in a link. This could be a button element type. So let's see. Let's check some mode. Put some content in them. Let's see. There we go. Yeah. I don't think really Bootstrap cares what type of elements they are all the time, as long as they're just elements. Because it's looking at those classes to style. It's really styling and moving the size of things. I can get it. So it's taking that and it's putting, you know, the padding and such on it. And that's really what Bootstrap's doing. It's applying these styles to this. So as long as the styles are going to work right, you know, has a relative position with a left float and the width of 50% and padding right 15 and padding left 15 and a displays in block, as long as all these things are working the way they're supposed to, it's going to work just fine with whatever elements you choose. Okay. So these are the two columns. Actually, let's put more in them so we can see this. The way these columns work by default is on mobile, they're going to stack. They're just going to collapse in and be on top of each other. There's a breakpoint. And there isn't any spacing between them, but right after this is the second one. First, second. Now what the column, this is where the column breakpoints lay. So this column medium means once the container width is below, below 970 pixels, it's going to collapse. Let's actually make this a little bit more interesting. And then, yeah. Make 3. Or, no, 1 row. We want 3 columns in that row. And then three paragraph. Put these inside of all these real quick. Right. Let's take one. That choose it. I guess that's 3 sentences. So this in. That's the content. All right. Three equally spaced columns have some content in them. So we have 3 of 4 columns. So 4 plus 4 plus 4, 4 times 3 is 12. So something that we shouldn't ever do is modify the actual Bootstrap file. So if you add files to your project via, the Twitter Bootstrap Rails gem, or if you're in JavaScript, if you're using an npm module for Bootstrap, those files are become, they're going to become available to you. They're going to be included. You're going to be able to find them, or if you download them locally, so that if you want them included in your project, in your asset pipeline, or whatever, they're going to be there on your drive, in your folder, and we don't ever want to modify these core files. So if we want to override something, well, we can do that too. And it's pretty cool that we could get as much as we have without having to write any styles so far. Let's make file.
So far you've only put Bootstrap in the HTML file, correct?
Yes.
So you're creating a custom CSS file right now?
Mm-hmm.
Are you going to put more Bootstrap in that, or are you just going to make adjustments to what you've already done?
So this is just going to adjust what's already done.
Okay, cool.
So it's basically saying, okay, I like everything that's here, but let's see, like, how about we change the background color of the page, or I want to color these differently, type of thing. Let's think. Well, first let's add this to our file.
So right now you're linking the CSS page to your HTML?
Yes.
Cool.
So now our custom CSS is on our page. We haven't written any yet, but it's there for us to use. And I suggest doing some custom CSS, or else, because Bootstrap only has so many styles, and it becomes very apparent that you're using Bootstrap, which isn't bad. Knowing how to use a framework is definitely a skill that's good to have and to show. But knowing also how to tweak it is going to be key too. Like I worked for a company and we used Bootstrap, but you would never say or be able to think that, or it would never look like we used Bootstrap because we had modified it so much. But still, a lot of the core functionality was there, which is what we liked about it, and how we could use a lot of that for its strength and its power, and not have to write it from scratch. So let's do some things. Change. Let's say we change the background. Darker gray. Let's just go with that one. Looks like a nice list. I can change these to bold. We can make our P a little bit bigger and change the color on it. All right. That is good. Am I getting my inheritance backwards? I thought the last thing was what was going to take over. I think I was wrong.
What are you trying to do right now?
My CSS isn't overriding Bootstraps,
Hmm.
and it should be. I'm pretty sure the last thing will load. Oh, supposed to be rel, not ref.
So
That
the
should do
last
it.
file will always overwrite it, even if it's not more specific in the last file.
Okay, yeah. I thought that was right. But it was an L instead of an F. There we go. Now, obviously, we would probably want to do some more work to this because this is not exactly where we want it to be. Let's get rid of the spray in here. Let's start working with some other pieces. Let class nav bar margin bottom can make 0. That should get rid of this little bar. Margin bottom. Spelling bottom. There we go. And yeah, so any CSS you write, you can override things and make it look more like you want it. I was just real quick showing that that is possible and worth doing. You can change any of these classes, how they're styled. If you see something that you don't necessarily, want to work a certain way, you can go and you can inspect it. Okay, H1, you can go, I like playing in here, looking at what is currently being used. So anything that's crossed out is being killed because of, and not used because of the inheritance chain. And, it's something that's being overridden. But, we see the font size for this, Jumbotron H1 class is 63 pixels. So maybe 55 is better. So, and I did a lot of work just like this when I worked for a company doing front end work.
Hey, Seth.
Yes.
Can I ask a quick question? Rob was saying he was wondering if the last file overwrote it, even though it was less specific. Like, if you
yes.
Can you clarify that just a little bit?
Yeah. So, Rob was asking specifically about if, this just says H1, or this just says T. And, let's go with
right.
H1.
So those are
this
tags,
just says H1.
right? Those are just tags or selectors.
So we're targeting all H1. So typically when selectors are more specific, those are the ones that are used. So Bootstrap is going to have more specific selectors than our custom CSS that we're writing. However, it's being overridden because it's coming after the Bootstrap CSS file in this HTML. So in the order that it's loading, it's saying, okay, I load the CSS file in a specific way, meaning the most specific selectors is what I use. However, I also load the whole CSS files in a specific way. So if the CSS code is loaded a certain way, and then the CSS files are loaded a certain way. So when the CSS files are loaded, even if it's less specific, it overwrites because of the order of the files.
That's interesting. I didn't know that either.
And I had a little bit more styling and maybe doing some more things with this that I was thinking about showing, but just want to recap a little bit. Bootstrap is a CSS JavaScript framework. It's super popular. It's super powerful. It's, for the most part, all just about class names. If we look, everything is just class names, and it's just HTML, CSS in the end. We can overwrite Bootstrap to make it look how we want. We just include a CSS and load it after Bootstrap in our page. And yeah, any other questions as we're coming to the end of the hour?
Are you going to do more of these study labs? Because I think a lot of people are interested in more front-end development, especially since you've done it for your job.
Yeah, I can't guarantee that I'll always be doing them, but I think we have an HTML and CSS lecture, so a topic. I actually solicited the other technical coaches and said, hey, what's a good topic for an HTML and CSS lecture? And one of them suggested Bootstrap.
Yeah.
That's where this came from. So, yeah, and we're always up to do what, what's requested. So students, reach out, let us know. If you're on, ask a question, let one of them know. We're all part of a team together, and they'll pass the word along, and we'll get things queued up. Let the instructors know, the section leads. They do these types of things too, and I know they probably have more planned out since but they're always wanting to do or pass along to us things that are needed. So yeah, spread the word and just let us know what you want us to talk about and work on, and we'll get stuff put together for you guys. Yeah, that's what I had for this evening. Little intro primer. I don't know that would go to the extent of crash course in Bootstrap, but hopefully you can play around with it a little bit now and not be so intimidated by it. There's a lot of stuff on their pages and documentation, but just take it bit by bit. Do something like I did, and just make one HTML file, start copying and pasting and putting stuff in it, and reloading your web page and seeing how it changed, and go from there. And you'll be surprised how it comes together.